64% knowingly prioritize their business.
Why do you think that is?
Because in order for it to be, I think we thrive on success just as humans.
Sure.
And in order for it to be successful, you do have to put time and energy and effort. And like it said, the reason for their poor love life is a lack of time, a lack of quality time. And we've gone through a lot of that. And what does our time look like? We all have the same amount of time in a day, but how we use it and how we prioritize it makes a difference.
Welcome to the Married Making Millions podcast. I'm James.
And I'm Angela.
And the reason we're doing this podcast is to empower success in business and resilience in marriage. And Angela and I are super passionate about marriage and business for high achievers, C-level executives. We've been there, we've done that, we're doing it. And so today we just want to talk about why we're doing this podcast, why we're so excited, why we're so passionate about it. We've got a lot of statistics to talk about. We want to try to keep these podcasts short and sweet, really give you all some nuggets and stuff to chew on. And so we hope that you'll share this with some people that want to strengthen their marriage within their business, whether they're high achievers, they own a business, they don't own a business, but they want to strengthen their marriage while achieving greatness, while striving for their dreams and their goals. So let's dive right in. Let's start talking about kind of like one of the main reasons why we're doing this and maybe the mission behind what we're doing.
Yeah, so James and I have been on a venture of entrepreneurship for the last 4, almost 5 years now. And one of the key things that we saw happening within entrepreneurship was how our marriage kind of tended to take a back seat. And we noticed the great need that there is for marriages to be encouraged within business. And also what it looks like as Christian business owners. I think there's a great need within that community as well. There's some myths or just some things that are thought about business owners within Christian circles. So our hearts were kind of heavy and burdened as we began this just journey of entrepreneurship, and we felt like God was laying on our hearts to start sharing the good, the bad, the ugly in this realm of entrepreneurs. So our goal is to try to bring kingdom work and entrepreneurship and marriage all together. One of the main reasons that this has been, again, on our mind is some of the statistics around entrepreneurship and marriage. It is
wild
and astonishing, the rates of divorce within entrepreneurship. So one of the sources that we found, Miha Law LLC, just wrote an article about it. It says that yes, business owners do have a higher risk of divorce. The United States divorce rate, sadly, is already around 37%. Some of those groups have higher divorce rates, including entrepreneurs and small business owners, and that divorce rate is around 50%.
That's incredible.
So even just reading that,
bad.
Even just reading that, it was like, I see how hard it is to balance. But as Christians now, we're called even more so to bring encouragement and light into this hard area. Another Fortune Well Alexa from Fortune Well wrote another article saying it's no surprise that entrepreneurs in the hustle of meeting payroll and growing their business find that personal life takes a back seat. However, when romantic relationships can't endure, business owners face professional and financial setbacks in addition to emotional ones. So not only did their marriages suffer, but then once their marriage suffered, so did their business.
Went down, yeah.
So it was like nothing was winning. If your marriage and your core, what God created as the core, isn't doing well, then there's no way for even the business to do well. So all these statistics just brought again to mind why we want to do this. But our mission is to provide insights, strategies, and inspiring stories that will guide our listeners toward cultivating resilient, thriving marriages that complement and enhance their professional journeys.
Yeah, and whether that's a business that you are owning or you run, maybe you're an entrepreneur, but maybe you're an intrapreneur. I know a lot of people that are really great intrapreneurs, so they work within a business and they can think critically, they can problem solve, and they help that business thrive. They have a great culture, great environment. And so those individuals too, they love their work. They love what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the work takes the first place and the family and their faith takes second and third place. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what we want to try to help people understand is you can have both, mm-hmm. but it takes a very strong, number one, strong will, strong faith, strong partnership. And so we have got a lot of episodes planned on some strategies that we've implemented, some things that we've had to do, and also a lot of bad stories mm-hmm. from our own experiences.
Yep.
I mean, I can just think of, and we'll talk about our story on the next episode.
Yep.
But some of the challenges early on was, just for lack of a better term, the business, and we own 7 Crumbl cookie franchises. We're getting into the pickleball industry. We own 13 licenses to open pickleball. We own a mm-hmm. bookkeeping firm. We're running a business podcast called McGuire Enterprise. Quick plug to those guys. Great business info, all business. And now we're starting this, and this stuff can quickly become your mistress. Absolutely. It can quickly become your side piece, if you will.
Yeah.
And your wife will feel that. Mm-hmm. Your husband may feel that if you're a female mm-hmm. entrepreneur or business owner, mm-hmm. Because you may not be cheating on them in the normal terms that we would think of cheating, mm-hmm. but you are spending all of your time, all of your energy. You're giving your employees more of you than you are your family, mm-hmm. your spouse, your wife. And so early on, and we'll tell that story in detail on the next episode, but early on, that can happen mm-hmm. if you're not careful, right? And you're not in tune and you're not communicating and all those things. But it's those, like those statistics you said, it's 10 times, maybe not 10 times, I'm exaggerating, but it's a lot easier to see your marriage erode and fall away when you are excited about something else, right? So I think that's, with entrepreneurship, it's very easy to get sucked into that because if you don't spend time with your family or your wife or whoever, you're making money. And so a lot of people say, well, I want to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But then it's this balance of like, well, okay, you're making a lot of money, but you have no time. And now you don't have a family, and now all of that crumbles. And so that statistic of when the family isn't doing good, the business falls as well. I've seen that 100 times. Yeah. It's just in the 4 years that we've been doing business. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that the lies people believe is that you can't have both. How in the world can you have a successful business and have a thriving marriage? Can those two things coexist?
Right.
And we want to be here to tell you that yes, it can exist. It's not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. It is hard. There's a lot of tears, but there's also so much joy in being able to allow both of them mm-hmm. to exist together.
Yeah, 100%. What else was on there for the statistics?
Yeah, divorce as an entrepreneur. For business owners experiencing divorce, 57% of those say that their business also took a financial hit, and 70% could not focus the same way. On the opposite hand, just talking about like their romantic lives, 25%, so out of 1,000 Americans who are business owners, they said that they were struggling to maintain healthy relationships, and nearly half of them said that they had a poor romantic life, and 25% of them said they had no romantic life. So there's just this gap of having a thriving marriage in business. And there's a good reason for that, right?
Well, and you can look at some of the largest and wealthiest people in the world. Elon Musk been divorced a bunch of times. Jeff Bezos got divorced. I mean, look at all the celebrities and all the people that make a ton of money and have large businesses. They haven't figured that out. Yeah. And so Angela and I are here to say the first thing that we believe is the most important is that our relationship is centered by Christ. It's centered by our faith. It's centered by a born-again relationship with our eternal Father. So that's where we believe. That's our core. But we don't believe that you have to be a Christian to have a good family life and a business life. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of communication. There's a lot of things that we'll talk about over the next months and years about how to help with that. And we plan on bringing on really great entrepreneurs who have a strong marriage, who have a strong foundation, and who have made it work to give other ideas, other pro tips on how to do that. But that's where our foundation starts. And we are definitely not perfect, and we've made a lot of mistakes, mainly me. But we've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to having a thriving marriage and having a thriving business. But for us, it always goes back to how's my relationship with my Savior? How's my relationship with God? If that relationship is not good, then I will have no desire to serve you. I'll have no desire to serve my family. I'll have no desire to be the husband, the leader, the father, the man that I'm supposed to be. If that relationship here is not good, then the relationship here won't be good either. Right. So that's kind of where we come from. That's kind of our background. That's what we believe. But we don't believe that that's the only way to have a thriving marriage. We believe that's a really good way. But we believe that there's other ways to do that and really be intentional about it. Yeah. But the one thing I would say about that little article there is that if your mind, because business is so complex and really hard depending on what type of business you're in, if it's a franchise, if it's manufacturing or tech or automation, or maybe you're a solopreneur, if you don't have certain things in place to automate your business and everything's solely relying on you, then it will be a lot harder when you do try to pull away, get time back to spend with your family, your spouse. Because in the early days, and you would probably agree with this, it required 10x the work that it requires now. Yep. It's almost like a rocket ship, right? The rocket ship needs 50,000 gallons of fuel just to get out of the Earth's atmosphere. But once it's out of the Earth's atmosphere, it just barely needs anything to keep it in orbit. Right. And that's really the same thing with a business if it's being built properly. And so there are some seasons, I would say. We'll talk about that. But there is seasonality to business and marriage and thriving and stretching and thriving. But if you don't have things squared away in the business and you don't have things squared away in the home, then the business will 1,000% suffer. Yep,
I think they'll both suffer if there's not a balance there. They will both suffer in their own ways. The other thing that I think we're going to address as we go through is there's different seasons of life have kind of called us to different roles, right? Like we've worked side by side. I've worked in the home while you worked in the business.
We've both
worked in the business. We've done different roles. So I think being able to address all of those different roles and how each of them have played a different part and a different balance within our business and marriage too will be important to go through.
Yes, absolutely. And we can talk about that. I think roles are super important to understand. And thankfully, when we were starting business, we didn't have a child. Right. So that would have thrown, so there's a whole nother wrench that you have to consider, especially if you're a girl dad or a boy dad. There's differences there, right? Dads, if you're a girl dad, she wants your time. She wants to tell you all the things she's doing. She wants to ride on your back. So there's these things that, can also throw other wrenches into the business and not just the marriage, but then it's now I'm a husband,
family,
I'm a father, and I've got one or I've got two. And so we'll unpack some of that as we've gone through that and are still going through that, and by no means are perfect, but we want to help create and build this community of listen, marriage is not easy. Now you throw a business on top of that. Now it's harder. It's 10 times harder. So Yeah, that was good. And there was a couple more. Or was there one more?
Well,
No.
one more sad statistic is that due to stacked duties and late night meetings, business owners say the primary reason for a poor love life is the lack of quality time with their partner. 64% are more likely to prioritize their business success over their romantic partner. And in addition to that, more than 25% of business owners are unsatisfied with their work-life balance. So, I mean, two statistics that stand out there. 64% knowingly prioritize their business.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, because in order for it to be, I think we thrive on success, just as humans.
Sure.
And in order for it to be successful, you do have to put time and energy and effort. And like it said, the reason for their poor love life is a lack of time, a lack of quality time. And we've gone through a lot of that. And what does our time look like? We all have the same amount of time in a day, but how we use it and how we prioritize it makes a difference. But the sad thing is that 25% of them are like sad about that. They're unhappy, they're unsatisfied with their work-life balance, but they don't know how to get out of it, or they don't think that it's possible to have a balance. So let's just keep being unsatisfied, or let's put our time and energy into somewhere where I am satisfied. Which is work. Right. So it's just this vicious cycle of like, I'm not happy in this area of my life. This feels a little bit easier, or I am satisfied, so I'm just going to continue to pour time into this.
Do you think it's because people can, the business owner or the entrepreneur or the intrapreneur or the C-level executive, do you think it's because they can see the result? Like they can see the instant result, whether it's the paycheck or the bonus or the sale?
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a clear, concise goal, right? We're hitting targets when it comes to business.
Right.
In marriage, a lot of times we don't take the time or the energy to set those goals or to set those marks. So it just feels like a rat wheel, I think, for a lot of people.
Should we have some KPIs for our marriage?
Why not?
Do you want to hear what my KPIs would be?
Sure.
Well, this is not a kid's show, but maybe we won't talk about that on the first episode. I know what your KPIs would be.
See?
23 hours worth of quality time.
No, not 23 hours.
22. 20.
Maybe. But I think that's important. How many couples actually talk about that?
Very few.
Right. And in the beginning, we didn't talk about that either. So I think that contributes to when you don't know what the other person's needs are, or you don't know what your goals are, their expectations, then how are you supposed to meet them?
And we've had plenty of conversations, good and bad, about what's the expectation. What's the expectation for time here? Let's look at the calendar. What does that look like? Oh, you're using iCloud versus Outlook. Well, that doesn't sync up, so we need to... Right. So there's just so many things, and we're going to dive into a lot of that on what we've done to evolve over time. I'm still trying to get Angela on Microsoft Teams. We're working through that. But there's so many different things on the expectation side. And I know that sounds funny, but having KPIs for your marriage is probably a smart way to build habits.
Yep.
And I know it sounds so savagery or whatever, but if you don't schedule a date with your wife in the calendar, it's not going to happen. And that's how I was for a very long time, is we would have to finally put a date on the calendar. We don't really do dinner. Angela likes breakfast a lot more, and I enjoy coffee, so breakfast dates are great.
Yep.
But if we didn't put that on the calendar, if we didn't plan that ahead of time, just like I'll plan my sales, I'll plan my marketing, I'll plan my business, I'll plan my opening and my grand opening. We put so much time, effort, energy into these businesses. Yep. Why don't we do that the same for our families and our wife and our marriage? And I think the obvious answer here, and this might, again, sound silly, but I think the obvious answer is there's a financial benefit. There's a tangible asset, a tangible benefit that we see when we go to work, when we do things. The problem is the asset or the tangible work that we see from a marriage developing over time is we have really good kids when we grow up. We invest into our kids. We invest into ourselves, which therefore hopefully is a light to other people in marriage.
Right.
And they say, hey, how'd you guys do this? How did this work? How did that work? There's multiple married couples that I can think of off the top of my head that I say, wow, like they clearly had a thriving marriage, and I would love to be more like them. I would love to do a couple of those things that they do. And so as the entrepreneur, a lot of us are focused on tomorrow, next month, next year.
Yep.
In marriage, I think we need to be focused on what's the 20-year goal look like?
Right.
What's the 10-year goal look like?
Right.
What's the anniversary going to look like in 15 years?
Yeah.
So,
and we've talked through a lot of that stuff, and a lot of the goals that we set when we were first married or 5 years into marriage, we've now met. And I think that's because God's allowed us to pursue them together and shown us where we've misstepped or where we needed to focus on Him and each other more so that we can accomplish those goals. And one thing, I wish I knew the book because it was something that I was reading, but he was talking about how in marriage we either are working back to back, where you're looking at two different things and you're working towards two different goals, or you're working side by side and you're still working together forward, but you're still pursuing different goals, or you're face to face and you're working towards one thing together. And I think that's just a really beautiful picture of how God has turned us from back to back to face and pursuing the same things. And when we're pursuing Him and then pursuing the goals that He's laid on our hearts, like this podcast, then I just think that His Holy Spirit is behind it. So it's pushing forward that work and those goals. And that's where success in business, in the home, in marriage, that's where that can happen.
yeah. And talking a little bit more about that, number one, I love being face to face with you. It's the best. But talking about the podcast a little bit, I have been thinking about this for probably over a year. Maybe not praying about it a ton, but definitely, like, I think this is something that we need to get involved in. We're passionate about it. And then, I don't know, maybe it was 3 to 6 months after that. I think I probably told you about it because I always have these crazy ideas. And I think Angela just hopes that some of them will just die off. And
maybe.
A lot of them don't. But some of them do because I have too many ideas. And you brought it up, I think, out of the blue. And I have learned by now that if Angela is going to get involved into anything, it has to be her own choice. And it typically takes a long time, not a long time, but it takes a while for it to come to fruition. Like I'll throw out an idea and I'll go try to execute on it tomorrow, right? So I have learned over the last 13 years of marriage that if I come up with an idea and I get a little like eyebrow raise from Angela, then I might be onto something. But I don't want to push it. So I got to just pump the brakes, slow down, don't pressure too hard. And so you came around, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months after I mentioned it. And we kind of had some ideas. And then, we kind of just let it go by the wayside. It wasn't super fresh. But then I think 6 months after that, so probably
6 months ago-ish.
Yeah, 5 or 6 months ago, probably maybe March or April of this year, 2024, we actually started to envision what something would look like, what would we do, how would the rhythm look like, what should we talk about, and actually kind of plan it out. And one thing that's cool is that we have experience now with business and with some podcasting that, we really hope that we can build this into a community. We can build this into a thriving back and forth conversation, not us being subject matter experts because we're only 13 years into marriage here, but it's something that we're passionate about. And so if we can spark the conversation about business and marriage or high income earner, high achiever and marriage, then we want to do that, and we want to get the conversation started, and we want to engage people and find out, how have you done it? What have you done to make it work? What vacations have you taken? What are you using for calendaring tools? Is there a system that we don't know about that we should know about?
Yeah.
And there's other people out there that are probably asking the same exact questions.
Right.
And there's probably wives sitting at home that are like, when's my husband coming home from work? And we want to talk about that. And I want to talk to that husband, like, been there, done that, still doing that sometimes because it needs to be done. But to what extent, to what impact are you doing that? And so we're really excited. I wanted to just maybe talk about a couple of the topics.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of topics, but I think going through a few of them, just kind of giving some insight on what we're hoping to cover and kind of go over.
A lot.
Yes. So we're not going to cover all of them, but we'll name a few here. So we want to talk about our story probably on the next podcast and really give people understanding who we are, where we come from, what we're doing, and hopefully where we're headed, along with our marriage story and our entrepreneur kind of story. And then we want to talk about getting out of debt, being in debt, getting out of debt, on what a financial burden that is to your marriage.
Yep.
And when you can get debt free, when you can strive for that and actually make that happen, incredible. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about some biblical stances on money and business.
That's a hard one.
And I think that's going to be an interesting episode. So stay tuned to that because there's a lot of different views on whether Christian people should be wealthy, whether they should make a lot of money.
Yep.
There's a lot of scripture behind money. The Bible talks about money a lot.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So stand by for that. We're going to talk about generosity, giving. Is business godly? We want to talk about, is high success okay? Is being an influencer, is being a celebrity, is that biblical? Is that right? Let's see here. What are some other ones?
Working with your spouse in business. What does that look like? Even if you're not working in the actual storefront, how do you work alongside of your partner? And how do you make that work?
That's a tough one. I fired Angela a few times when she worked for us, for us. For the business.
Right.
Being good stewards of our money versus being a lazy money manager. Are we just hoarding all this cash and just putting it in the bank and just buying all these nice things? Or are we investing for the future and being a steward? There's a clear difference between a money manager and a steward. So we want to talk about that. Let's see. We want to talk about couples not sleeping in the same bed. That's a touchy one. Touchy. That'll be controversial, I'm sure, or the same room. How can trauma impact your marriage? How can that make you move closer to your husband or wife? And how that can make you move further away from your husband and wife? And some of the challenges of that. We want to go over some marriage quizzes that we took when we were first doing marriage counseling or getting involved. Those were interesting. I don't know if we'll go through all that. And then just a couple other ones without going into too much more depth. We want to talk about our journey with children. We want to talk about IVF. We've done that a few times. We want to talk about adoption. Our little baby girl, Lila, is the cutest. And hopefully and thankfully she's sleeping right now. But we want to talk about adoption. So she's our first. We're going through the process to adopt our second here soon, which is incredible. We want to talk about just all sorts of topics that have to do with marriage, that have to do with conflict in marriage, and tie that in with business, because those two things make life really, really hard and really complicated. Marriage is complicated and hard without a business,
right?
But you throw that in, you throw a type A person, a high achiever, a really good salesperson who really wants to succeed and achieve success, and you could have a recipe for disaster that the married couple, when they got married, had no clue was even going to be a problem. We're just going to be opening businesses, selling stuff, and making a ton of money, and we're going to be living happily ever after. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. And so hopefully we can give some ideas, some tips to help with that.
We also want to be encouraging, like James said. We want this to become a community. I think business also often feels so lonely when you're going through it, which is ironic. I think, again, a lie that people are sold is that somehow business in itself creates community. And I think that business is actually one of the most lonely places that you can be in. So that also makes your marriage more vulnerable in different ways. So I think creating a community that is encouraging, and we want people to know you're not alone in marriage, in entrepreneurship, but that there can be a balance, and it can be a healthy space.
Yeah, absolutely. So building that community is coming. That's going to take some time. We are slowly working on the back end of things, so bear with us as we get the Instagram set up and the YouTube and the podcast. But anything to close out? Any comments?
I'm just excited. I feel like it took me so long to get to where I am now, but it was definitely through the Holy Spirit's conviction over several months, as James said. But it is funny. One thing I do want to say about that is the Lord often places things on our hearts at separate times, and it only ever works out when we're both on the same page. And typically that's a few months or years apart. But when we come to the same page, it's like, okay, now it's time to do something. And so the Lord laid it on James's heart almost a year ago, and then slowly laid it on my heart over the next 6 months until we were on the same page. So I'm just excited because I feel like this is something that we're called to do, and I know it's gonna be good.
It's going to be a grind. It's going to be a grind.
Like sure. Everything else.
Late nights and early mornings. We are looking for a babysitter for Lila during certain periods of the day. So if somebody's available, let us know. No, I'm just kidding. We have a great nanny. So super appreciate everybody connecting with us. For the 7 of you that listen to this episode, probably all of our family. So please share this to other people who are married, which is a very wide net, but also those who are high achievers and business owners or entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs. We really want to connect with that group. The final thing that I'll say is we haven't found a community like this. We haven't found a community that is really adamant about having a strong marriage and a strong family and is also in business. Maybe they're out there, but we just haven't found it, and so we want to try to create that. And so we want to bring people together, whether you're a solopreneur, a salesperson, a high achiever. We want to bring people together, and we have a lot of ideas of what this could look like in the future. I'm talking events, I'm talking trips, but that's a dream down the road. So if you've got some people in those spaces or in those categories who might find some value from hearing our story, hearing some interviews that we're going to bring on, some people that we're going to bring on about these subjects and topics, then share this with them. Follow our Instagram, Married Making Millions, our YouTube as well, where we'll have the video up there. We'll also have some short clips and things like that. So yeah, give us some feedback. Let us know what you think.
Ask questions.
Ask questions. Love to answer those. Do a couple podcasts on just questions and so on.
Yep.
And we're excited. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.